In 2002, eBay bought a payment startup called PayPal for $1.5 billion. That sounds like the ending, but it's not. Because after that deal, the people who came out of PayPal went on to build Tesla, SpaceX, LinkedIn, YouTube, and a huge chunk of the internet's culture we now take for granted. One startup that did not just survive the dot-com era, but actually quietly produced an entire generation of tech giants. This is the story of the PayPal Mafia. Hello everyone, welcome back to Tech Stories, where we tell the most exciting stories on tech. And today with a story about the PayPal Mafia. So what kind of geniuses, what kind of big company came out from this little startup called PayPal?
It is kind of wild because PayPal was not just a payments company. It was a pressure cooker for ambition.
Yeah, it's the story about all these companies which came out from this little PayPal startup. And we will go deep into the background of the stories of the people behind it. They literally shaped our internet.
Wait, are we calling it a mafia because they were secretive or because they all somehow ended up running the world? Or
Yeah.
so...
I think most likely the second one, because they're really running the world, because they have so much influence on their websites, on their platforms, that we cannot imagine that this all came from a small tiny group which started back in PayPal.
Right. It is less trench coats and more group chat that accidentally became history.
Okay, let's dive in. At first, PayPal looked like a weird little internet payment company trying to survive in a chaotic market. But inside of that company was something much more explosive. It was a mix of personalities that should not have worked together. And that group had arguments, frictions, ego, paranoia, and a lot of ambition. So you must imagine PayPal was not really a peaceful company, it was a pressure cooker.
Yes, and that pressure cooker vibe is basically the origin story of half of modern tech. PayPal looked like a scrappy payments hack, but inside it was a live experiment in clashing worldviews.
Yeah, I think it was about the culture. So many different personalities inside this company, and they had a lot of friction going on inside. Now, let's start from the beginning here. Because to understand PayPal, you have actually to go back in the 1990s when the internet was expanding fast. But money online was still a very unsafe and awkward situation. Paying someone through the web was not really normal, and PayPal, they saw that gap. For most of us who don't know PayPal beginning, it started actually as Confinity, a small startup that originally was working in digital payments for Palm Pilots. Do you still remember what is Palm Pilots?
Oh yes, the Palm Pilot era, when the future lived on a stylus and a gray little screen. Confinity started with that beam money between handhelds idea, but the internet basically yanked them toward email payments because that's where the real scale and chaos were.
At the time, actually, it was a very futuristic way to move your money between handheld devices. So I could transfer my money directly. And the question was, what if money could move as easily as an email? And that was a spark.
Yes, that spark is everything. The Palm Pilot wallet is cute in a scrappy early gadget way, but it is still trapped inside the idea of a device you carry around, like a digital coin purse. The moment someone says, "What if money moves like email?" the story stops being about a wallet and becomes about a network. And that is where the drama kicks in. So the real question becomes, who runs the money email system? Who gets to verify delivery? And what happens when somebody tries to spoof it? Because of course they will.
And then the company Confinity, which is this tiny startup working on these Palm Pilots, they merged with a company called X.com from someone now very well known, Elon Musk. and they changed the name to PayPal. And actually, it is now that the real story begins, because PayPal did not just need to solve payments problems, it needed to survive the people building it.
Yes, that line, it needed to survive the people building it, is pure gold, because PayPal was as much a social engineering problem as it was a software one. Confinity meets X.com, and suddenly you do not just have code to ship, you have egos, philosophies, and competing origin stories trying to ship at the same time.
Yeah, and that is the big pressure cooker. And I think that pressure cooker was exactly who formed many of the personalities, many of the people who went on to shape the internet we know today. So let's start with the first person in the pile, the first person in this environment of the early PayPal. Let's start with himself, the man, Elon Musk.
Musk walks in and he is not thinking, let us make paying people online a little easier. He is thinking, let us build the financial operating system for the internet. And that is a different kind of ambition, because once you frame it that way, everything else starts to look like a distraction or a stepping stone. The useful part is obvious. That scale mindset forces speed, bold product bets, and a willingness to pick fights with entrenched systems. The dangerous part is it can turn collaboration into collision, because if you believe you are building the one true platform, you do not just debate features, you debate destiny. Which is a very dramatic thing to do inside a tiny startup with a burn rate.
Yeah. Because you're still inside that PayPal, you must imagine these guys are not who they are today. Elon Musk, also, he's just one person starting in a small company. And now he's already creating a lot of friction, because he merged together with Confinity and creating PayPal. And then there was the founder of Confinity, Peter Thiel. And if Musk was the rocket, Thiel was actually the cold stare from the control room, because he was very contrarian. He is the guy who looked at the rules everybody else accepted and immediately asked why. He believed actually that the goal was not just to survive in a crowded field, but it was to dominate it. And that worldview would later echo through Silicon Valley for years.
He is not allergic to conflict, he is allergic to consensus. And that contrarian reflex matters, because in payments, being slightly better is meaningless. You need scale, trust, and a lock-in effect. So his instinct is always, how do we become the default? What makes the pairing combustible is they both want domination, but they narrate it differently. Musk wants the grand unified system, the everything app before anyone called it that. Thiel wants the wedge that turns into a monopoly, the move that makes competition irrelevant. Same destination, different maps, and they will absolutely fight about the route.
And the most amazing, I think, about the story of the early PayPal, Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, they even weren't just co-founders, they were actually roommates. Imagine you sharing an apartment in Silicon Valley while building what they believed would become the future of finance. And story tells that in the beginning this worked quite well, because they're working together, also living together. Both believed in building something big, but beneath that surface they were completely different. Musk actually was very intense, fast decision, big visions, move quickly, fix later. And he wanted to turn PayPal into a full-scale online bank, an everything platform. And that's why he also has this idea of the X.com, which he turned Twitter. He reused that domain name later on Twitter. Now, Peter Thiel, he was very controlled, strategic, philosophical, suspicious of complexity, and he wanted to have focus, simplicity, precision. And this difference started to show up in everywhere, in meetings, in production decisions, in hiring, and even in the apartment they shared. Because imagine this. You're building a company all day, arguing about the future and fighting about which direction to take, and then you go home to the same person you just argued with. No separation, no resist, just more tension. And inside that company, lines started to forming because some people aligned more with Elon Musk with his very aggressive vision, and others trusted more Thiel because he is more controlled and approachable. And it wasn't an open war, but it was a quieter. And then the moment that changed everything. The board made a move. He was actually replaced as the CEO, and Peter Thiel stepped in. Just like that, no dramatic confrontation, no big announcement, just a shift in power.
And that is the twist. Two future titans, literally sharing a roof, building the future of money. And then the company does what companies always do under stress. It picks a direction by picking a person. What makes that CEO swap so cold is the asymmetry. Musk is thinking in sweeping platform terms, moving fast, rewriting everything, even identity and branding. Thiel is optimizing for survival in a hostile environment. And payments is hostile by default, because one outage, one fraud spike, one compliance scare, and you are done. So when the board moves while Musk is away, it reads like politics, but it is also the company revealing what it values in that moment: control over velocity.
At PayPal, actually, there's this energy going on. It's not a room full of people trying to be liked. It was actually a room full of people trying to be right and fight and stress and conflicts and collision. And then there was also Reid Hoffman. Hoffman was almost the opposite of Thiel in temperament. He had started life thinking like a philosopher, studying big human questions and trying to understand what scale really meant. And at some point, he realized that ideas alone were not enough. So he brought his philosophical mind into business. And unlike the loud founder types, Hoffman was thinking about people.
Thiel is thinking power and positioning. Musk is thinking systems and speed. And Hoffman is thinking, okay, but how do people actually coordinate, trust, and build reputations when everything is digital?
Okay, so now we took three persons here. Now Peter Thiel, who was on the beginning there, then Elon Musk joined, two already giants of the tech world, and then Reid Hoffman, who is also inside that PayPal as one of the heads of the company. Now the fourth person is Max Levchin.
Max Levkin is where the story gets deliciously technical. He is the engineer with a founder's paranoia, the person who looks at a shiny idea like sending money by email and immediately asks, cool, how does it not get robbed into the ground? At early PayPal, Levkin is basically the anti-fraud brain, the one building the nervous system that can detect weird patterns, bad actors, and synthetic identities before they metastasize.
In a payments company, I think that view is very crucial, and he played a big role for PayPal to be successful as it is. And then comes the fifth person, which is David Sachs. And Sachs, he came out from consulting, which means he had to unlearn a lot of the moment he arrived. A startup is not a neat strategy deck, it's a mess.
Yes, Sachs is the guy who walks into the chaos with a consultant brain and then gets forced to evolve fast. Because in that PayPal era, you cannot PowerPoint your way out of fraud, fires, and user confusion. You have to turn messy reality into a product people can actually use. And that is his niche in your lineup. Levkin is building defenses, Thiel is shaping the competitive posture, Musk is pushing platform scale, Hoffman is tracking the human network effects, and Sachs is translating all of that into something shippable and legible.
And PayPal won because it had friction. Sachs helped to force that discipline. And the weird part is this whole company was being built by people who did not practically enjoy comfort. They really liked to argue, they liked the pressure, and they liked being tested. And that is how you get a company that survives a market full of sharks. But the next problem actually almost killed them.
Oh, yes. This is the part where the thing that made them strong almost turns into the blade that cuts them. Because a culture built on friction and pressure can outrun competitors, sure, but it can also start grinding its own gears. And then the next problem shows up not as a rival, but as something boring and lethal, like cash flow, a delayed launch, a quality disaster, or one key deal falling through.
Yeah, exactly. So PayPal did not just have a product risk, it had an existential risk because fraud was a monster at that time. Every growth spike created a new attack surface, and the company's survival depended on whether it could get ahead of the people trying to exploit it. So that is the part actually that outsiders miss because they think like PayPal was just clever payment app, but actually it was an arms race, a living battle between the trust and abuse, between the scale and collapse, between growth and fraud. And inside that battle, personality mattered.
Yes, and this is where PayPal stops being a cute checkout button and becomes a war room. Fraud is not a bug here. It is a predator that evolves every time you grow. And the brutal irony is that success makes you more vulnerable because it widens the attack surface. And the tension inside the company gets sharper too because you are not just building features, you are choosing what kind of fight you are in.
Yeah, and there was another pressure actually building at that time, and it was called eBay. PayPal kept getting pulled deeper and deeper into eBay's ecosystems because people needed a fast way to pay strangers online. And that actually was the magic because PayPal was not just a tool, it was a trust layer, a bridge between people who had never met. And once that happens, a product stops being optional, and their product really became the infrastructure on how PayPal works because in 2002, eBay buys PayPal because it is already so integrated into their system that they took the step and bought it for $1.5 billion. And that actually should have been the big exit for all of the people. They walked away with millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, and could have said, okay, that's the finish line. eBay will take over from here. But instead, it just was the launch pad.
Of course, it was not the ending. The acquisition is the clean movie finale, but for this crew, it was the opening credits. PayPal became the trust bridge for paying strangers, and once you are the default on a marketplace like eBay, you are basically infrastructure, which is why eBay had to swallow the thing whole. And then comes the twist. The people do not disperse, they ricochet. They take the lessons from the fraud arms race, the growth pressure, the intensity culture, and they go build the next wave.
Yeah, exactly. Because when PayPal ended, the people, they did not. They scattered into the internet's next phase, and each one with one project, each one with different ambitions, running out there and shaping the internet in a way which was unimaginable by then. For example, Elon Musk took his same energy and built Tesla and SpaceX. He doesn't just want a company, he wants to rewrite a category. Now, the other guy is Peter Thiel. He took his contrarian worldview and kept leaning into power, scarcity, leverage, and asymmetric bets. So, that thinking helped him to shape Planeteer and influence countless Silicon Valley's decisions after that. Do you know what Planeteer is?
Yes, and I love that you asked, because it is one of those names people half remember and then misquote forever. Palantir, not Planeteer, is the company Peter Thiel co-founded after PayPal. It is a data analytics platform that helps organizations integrate lots of messy data and run investigations or decision support on top of it. And it became especially known for work in government and security contexts. The through line from PayPal is pretty direct. After fighting fraud and identity games online, the next obsession is making sense of patterns in oceans of data.
Yeah, and this is something which is really deep ingrained in how the government works. All this intelligence. Peter Thiel is deep into that, and he has some very extreme mindset. He's a very polemic personality, I would say, at least.
Yeah, he is definitely a polarizing figure. And a lot of that comes from the combination of big contrarian ideas and the kind of government adjacent work Palantir is associated with. People tend to react on two tracks at once. One is the legitimate need for tools that detect fraud, crime, or security threats. And the other is the fear of surveillance, mission creep, and opaque decision making.
Yeah, and then Reid Hoffman, he turned his beliefs in human networks and founded LinkedIn. That was no accident, of course, and because he had already this thinking about internet as a web of relationships, not just of websites. And LinkedIn actually became the professional graph made visible, is the place where professionals go to network. Then we have Max Levchin. Am I saying his name right?
Yep, you are saying it right. Max Levchin. Some people lean a little heavy on the second part and make it sound like Levkin, but your version is totally natural. And he is such a perfect contrast to Hoffman, right? Hoffman is networks and social graphs. Levchin is patterns and defenses. The guy who stares at fraud like it is a chess puzzle that will not stop cheating.
And next, David Sachs carried the product discipline he learned in PayPal, and then he built another surprising company. Do you know which company he built?
Yes, David Sachs went on to co found Yammer, the enterprise social network that was later acquired by Microsoft. It was basically Facebook, but for your workplace.
Amazing. I think we know about Yammer. Now they rebranded it to Viva Engage. And then we have two guys which were just kind of employee at PayPal. They came on to found maybe the most influential website in the world. Their name is Chad Hurley and Steve Chen. They were also early PayPal employees and they later co-founded YouTube.
Yes, and that jump is so deliciously ironic from moving money safely to moving video effortlessly. Two PayPal employees, Chad Hurley and Steve Chen, take the pain they saw in sharing things online and aim it at media instead of payments. And YouTube is basically the same structural trick PayPal pulled on eBay, just in a different domain. Make something radically easier than the old way, hit a network effect, and suddenly you are not a website anymore, you are infrastructure for how the internet behaves.
Yeah. And the most amazing of this story, I find, is that the amount of people don't stop here. It just continues. The amount of these unbelievable, big, successful companies which are built from the PayPal alumnus doesn't stop because we still have Jeremy Stoppelman and another PayPal alumnus which co-founded Yelp.
Yes, Jeremy Stoppelman is another one from that same orbit, and Yelp is such a classic next step. Once payments and identity get solved enough, the next battlefield is trust in information.
Yeah, that's the kind of platform where you go to see what restaurant should I trust. What that sounds small, but if you realize how much of the modern internet behavior is built on reviews, recommendations, and crowd trust, that's amazing. And Yelp is in the middle of this.
Yelp looks small until you realize it is basically a trust primitive for the physical world, turning word of mouth into searchable infrastructure. And once you do that, you start shaping real world outcomes: which restaurants survive, which clinics get calls, which neighborhoods get foot traffic.
So you see that the PayPal, I call it the PayPal Mafia, but these guys who come from PayPal, they did not just build companies, they built the next user behaviors for the internet. So you have payments, internet websites, you have professional identity, online video reviews. And these are not side quests, these are pillars of modern digital life. And the wild part of it is that they all came from the same place.
PayPal alumni is a wide net. Tesla and SpaceX from Elon Musk, Palantir from Peter Thiel, LinkedIn from Reid Hoffman, YouTube from Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and Jawed Karim, Yelp from Jeremy Stoppelman and Russell Simmons, and Yammer from David Sachs.
And the wild part is that all of that came out from the same place, a startup that was fighting for survival. So yeah, well, here is what makes this PayPal story so alive or so unbelievable. These people are not identical, they're widely different. Musk, Peter Thiel, Hoffman, Levchin, Sachs, Hurley and Chen, Stopperman, they all have different personalities, different instincts, different obsessions, but actually together they created a kind of engine for the modern internet. And maybe that's the real lesson which we can learn here.
Yeah, a messy band with great chemistry. The pressure cooker at PayPal did not produce clones, it produced specialists. And the friction you described earlier basically sharpened their instincts until each one knew what fight they wanted next.
Yeah, so the first insight I think I can get for myself here is that PayPal solved a very specific problem at exactly the right time, and this company became a founder factory because it put the high pressure, high ambiguity people in the same room. And one more thing that comes to my mind is that the internet after PayPal was not built on a single product, but actually that company was built on personalities. This is why this story is so fascinating. When people talk about startups, they usually talk about valuations, exits, and apps. But the deeper story here is about what kind of builder the company creates.
That is the mic drop. PayPal produced builders who learned to operate in chaos, under attack, with real stakes, and then carried that muscle into totally different arenas. And it also flips the usual startup myth on its head. The lesson is not just find product market fit. It is build an environment that forges taste, speed, and resilience, because that is what multiplies into an ecosystem of new companies.
Yeah. So next time when somebody says a startup changed the world, you can tell them that PayPal changed the world. It didn't create only a product, but it created people. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to follow Tech Stories for more. Every week we are here telling the most inspiring, interesting stories on tech. Hope to see you around. See you next time. Take care and bye-bye.